everybody, welcome to another episode of the FutureTech podcast series. It's me, Charlie Sell, the COO at Hydrogen Group, where I get to interview, talk to, have really interesting conversations with STEM, technology, engineering, maths leaders across both the UK, Europe and the globe, and really aimed at not only their career story and topics of passion, but always that career advice to many of the young listeners who are listening or watching this podcast via the STEM Ambassador Association. So I am really pleased to have Lukasz with me today. Lukasz is the Professor of Mathematics at Edinburgh University and also the Programme Director and Finance of Economics at the Alan Turing Institute. And the Alan Turing Institute is the UK's national centre for data science and AI research, with a mission to transform UK society through responsible development. So really, AI, data, mathematics, STEM at its core is really in the blood of Lukasz. And so very privileged to have him on the podcast today. So without further ado, Lukasz, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Thank you for a kind introduction.
Look, let's jump straight in. And please share a bit of your career history and your story of how you got into STEM.
Yeah, sure. So I always liked maths, and maths was one of those subjects that, to be honest with you, was something that once you clicked, you actually didn't have to do that much work about it. You didn't have to study that much, and you can still do reasonably well and good marks. So there was a little bit of me being lazy, perhaps, and just following what was coming relatively easy to me. And with maths, it is either understand it or not. And it's also a lot about what sort of teachers you meet on your way. If you find someone that is able to explain things to you in the way that you just see it and click, it can be easy, or you might be a bit less than lucky and just the way things are being explained to you is a little bit convoluted. Fortunately, these days, when I was studying mathematics, I had one teacher, so I had one shot. I'm either lucky and have this great teacher that is able to explain stuff to me or not. These days, with internet, with ChatGPT, with all the technology that we have, you can have so many different perspectives, and I'll talk a little bit about that towards the end of how to best use it. So that was maths, and then when there was a time to choose my path and which degree to go for the university, mathematics was sort of natural. So I studied that for 5 years. During those years, developed particular taste for probability theory, things that have to do with randomness. And I always like doing things also that felt that they have applications. When you're doing mathematics, it's quite easy to find sort of a rabbit hole and spend life thinking about some total abstract nonsense that apart from you, maybe 20, 30 people on the planet are able to understand. So I always like things that were a little bit, felt more applied, and particularly for whatever reason, I got interested in things to do with finance, stock markets, insurance at the time. And I was just interested how it is that, are we able to predict those models? Are we able to compute certain things despite all the randomness and predictability of how the markets may behave? How we value insurance? How much insurer companies should charge you for pensions, for insuring your car or house, even though they don't know what's going to happen and how these things play out. So I was really interested in that. I got my degree in maths, and then I had the opportunity to continue, and I felt I want to learn a little bit more. That it's probably with many subjects, but it's particularly true about mathematics. The more you know, the less you know. So at the end of that kind of 5 years degree, I just realized there is still very little I know. So I decided to continue and do a PhD. My PhD was on things again related to randomness and stochastic differential equations and kind of the objects that quant finance people in London, reading derivatives and all the kind of things like that, are using on a daily basis. I was very much interested in that. And then when I started making a little shift towards being able to use that mathematics to compute things, and that was kind of the shift that I also started being more interested in things related to machine learning and AI, although at that time I wasn't using that word, and I have been resisting using AI for very long. until recently that I gave up. These days we call AI pretty much anything. After my PhD, I spent a few years postdocing again in computational finance group in Oxford. At that time, I was actually considering moving to industry and capitalizing on my quantitative finance knowledge, but then I got persuaded by the University of Edinburgh to join and do more research. So I did. And I was doing happily my research in maths and this probability theory and various things and the kind of job when you're an academic, it gives you a lot of satisfaction, and you have also a lot of freedom. You can work on things that you find interesting and you're passionate about. You can work with people that you like and get along, and there are not that many jobs that gives you that much freedom. That disadvantages of this job as well, but I keep it for other time. And then around, was it 2005, 6, I can't remember exactly, when the DeepMind started making moves. Then they develop famous algorithm AlphaGo that learn playing game Go and winning with best human players. Then there was that shift, and it was around that time also that all the governments around the world started panicking. Like, who's gonna have control over these new super capable AI systems? And that was around that time that UK government decided that they should do something about this. And so they set up Alan Turing Institute, which is a national hub for AI and data science. And the idea was that in order to make a progress in AI and make AI useful and make AI making our lives better, we need to be able to bring people that have that technical knowledge, how to develop algorithms, how to analyze data, with people that have domain expertise. So for example, if you want to use AI in health, it's probably not a good idea that this will be fully developed just for computer scientists. And also it cannot be just developed by doctors, right? So you need those two communities to come together and work closely together. So that's what happened in the Turing. Turing, unlike universities, organized itself around application domains, so health, defense, and finance. And finance was one of those programs that I started leading about 6-7 years ago now. And that was that idea, what we can do to support financial services industry to make sure that they have right tools that they can innovate with AI responsibly. So we need to make sure that as we're developing and innovating, we want to be in control, we want to understand opportunities, we want to understand the value those AI systems are bringing, but at the same time, we need to be aware about potentially new risks that might emerge, how we control those risks, and what are we going to do if things go wrong. It's always when things go well, things go well, but it's what we do when things go wrong, and do we have the right tools and right controls in place to be able to deal with those situations. So there I spend a lot of time doing this, and it has been extremely rewarding. And one of the things that I'd say helped a lot in my career is to having this maths background. Studying mathematics and these more quantitative subjects give you ability to think abstractly and relatively quickly learn fairly complex areas. You are able to differentiate, what's a noise, what are these kind of little extensions and applications, and what is the core idea, what is the key concept behind all of those different things. And, and sometimes it's not easy, whenever you're trying to understand something, it might feel overwhelming. How much stuff is out there? Billions of podcasts, billions of open line courses, unlimited number of texts that we can read. And it's just not so easy to navigate that space and being able to have that kind of a core understanding of the core concept and that kind of foundation on which you can build. I found this to be a extremely important skill, and therefore sometimes I say that it's actually not so important what exactly do you study. Mathematics and computer science, you can think about it as a gym for your thinking and for your brain. Just need to exercise it, and if it's strong enough, no matter which field you're going to move, you will have that kind of a solid foundation and the muscle to be able to work through challenging topics and challenges that you're trying to learn about.
Wow. And what was so good to hear about that is not only, I imagine your career choice of moving to be the professor of mathematics at Edinburgh or going into the commercial sector, utilising your skills with finance and quantum, you chose your passion over finance, maybe. Yet you have been able to then, with the Alan Turing Institute, keep that sort of governance layer of just how the opportunity, but also the risks behind how fast data and AI is growing. It's I can only imagine the sort of information or the knowledge you might know that has, we have to use to protect both our financial institutes as well as support them. So yeah, I can imagine that's incredibly interesting. So then thinking about moving on about how that relates when you're thinking about that wider piece, and we discussed a little bit around, reinforcement learning and synthetic data. You talk to me a bit about where your passion lies when you're combining both the academic but the commercial implications, I guess, of data and AI.
Yeah, so my interests are quite broad, and being able to work and lead large research programs gives you a chance to dip your fingers into different pies and work with lots of talented people. That is extremely rewarding and allow you to do significantly more than if you were working your ways yourself through those topics. I particularly find reinforcement learning as the areas that I'm particularly passionate about and do quite a bit of research. So this is the idea around how we learn, and a kind of a basic principle it is that, as often in life, we need to make certain decisions in the face of uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And we assume that maybe there are some certain patterns, and we make the best decision. And once we make that decision, we're going to find out the outcome of that decision, and hopefully we're going to learn from that. That kind of reinforce that we continue it. Hopefully the next day we do a better decision, and so on, so on, so on. So we are not able to formalize this, and we are able to run that kind of processes on a computer. And we've been doing this for many, many years. In engineering, it's called a control theory, and have been used to when we landed on the moon for the first time. It was a big application of control. Often in mathematics, we were making the assumptions that we kind of knew what's underlying model when we're making decision, that we modeled an environment in which decision is being made. Quite often that's unrealistic. Or even if we know the model, imagine the game Go or chess, there is a number of possible combinations and moves, makes it so a kind of a search space for optimal decisions so huge that we need to come up with more clever techniques of how to navigate this. So reinforcement learning is one of those ideas, how we make decisions optimal, best possible decision given what we currently know. And the big kind of, for me at least, a step was what DeepMind managed to train those systems from scratch, playing the game Go, by just teaching the system the rules of the game, but not actually telling the system how this game should be played. So the whole idea was that in the very initial phase, the computer scientists or engineers working on the software, indeed they fed in machine with, say, 1,000 or a few 100,000 different games that humans played, and based on that, can you improve that and can you build on that? At the later stages, they completely eliminate that step. And computer systems were playing one with the other, so producing effectively synthetic games, artificial games, and by playing against each other, they were learning in that process what constitutes an optimal move, how to play better, and finally they achieved this superhuman performance. And there was a particular moment when those AI systems confronted the best Go player in the world in Korea, that all of a sudden the algorithmic systems, the AI reinforcement learning power system, made the move that is called the move 37 of the game. There was a 37 move in the game, which the audience consisting of a professional Go players concluded that this is some sort of malfunction, that this is a silly move. No human expert will make such a silly move. Then to realize several moves later, that was the most genius move they ever seen in a history, which is interesting. And it shows that, and this has been sort of pattern replicated itself in a number of scenarios, that wherever we try to fit those systems with our human knowledge, and they kind of stick around that human knowledge, and therefore we get something that is anticipated. They compute things much faster, and they can process huge amount of information, but they don't necessarily create new knowledge. That move 37 happened. That's actually a new knowledge. That's another kind of form of intelligence that, having been biased, but how humans were playing the games has been purely learn optimal ways of doing that. Now humans actually can learn from those, and this is, by the way, already happening in chess, that the chess masters are training with the computers, and those algorithmic systems suggest the moves that haven't been documented in the books and strategies around chess, and you can learn and explore, and it completely opens your horizons, and ultimately humans can become a better chess players in the game, which is extremely fascinating. So that was a big moment. One of the kind of big contribution there was that even though the knowledge around those algorithmic reinforcement learning systems hasn't shifted that dramatically in the last 20 years, I mean, there's lots of development, but kind of the core principles are the same. It was that combination of this reinforcement learning with deep neural networks that I'm sure everyone heard about that made that combination, this duo, extremely, extremely powerful. More recently, there was an announcement by a Chinese company who developed large language model, those chatbots, that I'm sure everyone listening to us had the chance to play with and experience how powerful they can be. They've also used those reinforcement learning techniques, and the models demonstrated that they begin to reason without specifically, again, feeding them the data that could instruct them how humans reason. They just run those reinforcement learning. Of course, there's a lot of engineering and a lot of work that goes into this. But it was, again, quite incredible. Those algorithmic systems itself can figure out how to reason about, solving more complex problems when this kind of step-by-step solutions are required. It's completely mind-blowing, and it opens a huge, huge opportunities for that kind of technology.
Yeah, wow. And it's, again, similar to your career story, just hearing your passion for, the subject matter at heart, and as you said, with reinforcement learning, but also, Move 37, that the fact that AI and data can actually now educate us, and you've presented it in a Terminator style way, where it's going to take over. Actually, is if it's done properly, we can learn and support it. And I think that example is brilliant for many of our listeners, that there's so much opportunity out there of what the future can be. If we embrace it and embrace it in the right way. And I think there's a real piece here that there's a real importance that companies and academic institutes work together, don't they, in regards to how we can move this forward and both look at the opportunities but also protect and safeguard what we're doing, because it really is evolving we need both. We need the data and the corporate world very much looking at the opportunities but the risks, and then the academic world very much being able to try and future-proof it, I guess. Would you agree with that?
No, completely. I'm a strong believer in collaboration.
Yeah.
We need to work together, and this is one of the things that work reasonably well at Turing, that a kind of need of combining technical expertise with domain expertise together. When we're deploying those systems in specific contexts, only in the specific context we can fully think about where the opportunities are, where the risks are, and how we should control them, and how we should monitor those systems, and how should we develop this technology. Thinking without that context, this is very, very challenging. The main incentives being how we create the right incentives for those interactions to happen, right? We don't want to go into the world where there is 2-3 big tech companies that have monopoly on how things are being developed. We want a kind of healthy market with a competition and the right incentives that everyone can benefit from.
Yeah. Again, I totally agree. So, time flies by when we talk about stuff as passionate as we have. And so brings us on to the final part of the podcast, where it would just be great to hear your thoughts. So 1 or 2 bits of career advice. When a young person is listening to this podcast, they want a career within STEM. What career advice would you give our young people?
Yeah, sure. I think kind of 3 things. Never stop being curious, never stop learning. Be adaptable. Don't be afraid to change career, try different things, and surround yourself with bright, like-minded people, ideally smarter than you, so you can learn from them. So maybe a little bit more on each of this. So I think it's just impossible to fully anticipate what the world would look like in 20 years from now. We already have systems that there was actually a little anecdote on that radiology, about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit less. Those AI systems became so powerful that they just started being much better and diagnosing the images, medical images. And so then people concluded that it's going to be waste of time training for this kind of jobs. And there is now a huge gap on the market because not enough people have been trained, and those systems are good, but then we still need humans in the loop. So this is just a kind of what I'm saying is impossible to fully predict. But being curious, trying to understand things at the little deeper level, investing that time, definitely. And as I said before, I don't even think that this is necessarily extremely important what exactly you're going to learn, so long that you have that ability to know how to learn things quickly is absolutely the key. Related to that is that being able to adapt. I would say don't be afraid of changing things, collecting experiences. Again, sometimes, we are taking jobs and tasks that might seem not that exciting or maybe not that relevant to our expertise, but then we're going to interact with people that we're going to learn so much we haven't anticipated. And again, impossible to predict, but we're just going and trying things and doing things and doing them the best you can. And networking, one thing I definitely learned, this importance of, but what I mean, but networking can have many connotations, surrounding yourself with like-minded people, people that you can talk about your interesting problems, people from who you can learn by doing things together. There's the saying that if you're in the room, if you're the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room. And I believe that one of the perks, in working in academia is that you have the super talented PhD students working with you, and it's just extremely rewarding working with them, and they come with these amazing ideas and fresh perspectives on things that you never thought about, and having that kind of people around you is really amazing.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more with that last statement about if you're the cleverest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. I think that translates to every profession, walk of life. That growth mindset, I think, is really, really so important. But yeah, thank you. Never stop learning, being adaptable, and surrounding yourself with great people or like-minded people. I couldn't agree more. Well, Lukasz, thank you so much. It's been so good to have you on the podcast, and thank you for sharing such interesting insights.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, really, really enjoyable. And so for everybody, that's another episode of our FutureTech podcast. As many of you know, the podcast is supported by the STEM Ambassador Association and is also on the hydrogen technology website and shared on LinkedIn. So for everyone, another massive thank you to Lukasz, and thank you for listening to FutureTech.
Thanks a lot.